Call the meeting to order.
Your switches are probably all off right now.
Call the meeting to order. This is the October 13, 2015 meeting of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission for the Town of Fairfield. First item on the agenda is Bills and Communications, the meeting minutes from September 29, 2015.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion approved by Commissioner Alessi.
Which two alternates?
And, who's sitting?
We get two. Megan Mark.
Megan Mark are sitting for Commissioner Kennelly and Commissioner Barrett's. Okay? So I have a motion. Can I have a second? Second by Commissioner Jacobson. Everybody have a copy of that? I didn't have any changes or edits. Any questions? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, the meeting minutes are adopted unanimously. Next item is a new application to recommend a public hearing. 60 Rygate Road, re-subdivision application of Love Where You Live Homes LLC for 2 lots in an A zone.
It is what it says, a 2-lot re-subdivision on Rygate, which is over off Alma Drive in the Duck Farm neighborhood. It is a re-subdivision, so it does require a public hearing.
Okay.
Make a motion to move public hearing.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi and second by Commissioner Francis. Second by Commissioner Francis. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Moved to public hearing unanimously. So the next item is public hearing. I'll call both items 1 and 2 together. Do we need a motion to hear them together? No? No. I'll call them both together. For the members of the public that are here, we have 2 items on the agenda for 4185 Blackrock Turnpike, both the application as well as the zone change. Everyone that wants to will have an opportunity to speak. I just ask you keep your comments germane to the application. The order is that the applicant will present, then the public will have an opportunity to speak, and then the applicant will have a rebuttal, and the applicant has the last word. At the conclusion of the rebuttal, I will close the public hearing on the item. Okay? So the items are 4185 Blackrock Turnpike, zone change application of New Way Associates LLC to establish a design commercial district on land presently zoned in the Neighborhood Design District and AAA. And item number 2, 4185 Blackrock Turnpike, special permit application of New Way Associates LLC pertaining to the construction of a medical office building.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, professional staff, and clerk.
Could you just move your mic up a little bit? Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, professional staff, and Madam Clerk. For the record, my name is Chris Smith. I am a land use attorney and a partner at Shipman & Goodwin, and I appear before you this evening, excuse me, on behalf of the owner applicant, New Way Associates LLC, whose managing member, Paul Richter of Fairfield, is with me here this evening. I appear before you concerning 2 applications. The first is a zone change application, and the second is a special permit site plan, and that is to permit a medical office use of real property known as 4185 Blackrock Turnpike. I'd like to introduce the members of the consultant team that you'll be hearing from this evening. Other than myself, will be Mr. Walt Jobst of the Huntington Company with offices here in Fairfield, who is our engineer, and Mr. Jobst will be walking you through the proposed site development. We have on our traffic engineer, Mr. Steve Coppola of Frederick P. Clark Associates. He's with us tonight. He assisted Mr. Galante, Mike Galante, in preparing the traffic report. Mr. Galante is not available this evening, but Mr. Coppola will be able to respond to any questions that you have, and will be providing you with an overview of the traffic study. And then finally, it's my understanding that Ron Gooden, our architect, we're hoping will be here this evening to review the architectural drawings with you. At the outset, I would like to say that this is the same site development proposal that you saw earlier this year, but we're still going to walk you through it. We do have what we believe constitutes a substantial change in circumstances relative to the application, and that is two things. One is we are not exercising a right to free cut relative to the property, and I'll walk through this, but this is just to give you a little overview. And the other is that Mr. Richter and New Way Associates LLC is willing to agree to a condition if the commission were to approve the zone change and the special permit to limit the use of the balance of the property that does not include the medical office use to single-family residential 2-acre building as permitted under your current residential AAA zone district. So again, that's the difference with the application, but I'll provide you with a little overview and walk you through it. We did submit very identical, some additional swapping out because we included your decision from earlier this year in this. So we have all the material that we will be referring to is in this packet, and in particular the cover letter, the narrative, is Exhibit 2. And that explains, I think, in detail the proposal itself. But what I'd like to do is provide you with an overview at this point before turning it over to Mr. Jobs, who will walk you through the site development proposal itself. As to the zone change application, as you're aware, the property is located to the south of Blackrock Turnpike at the interchange with the Merritt Parkway and Blackrock Turnpike, and it comprises, Mr. Jobs, my assistant, I was going to use the other one, but this one works just fine too. No, this is perfect. Actually, I'm going to start with this, but I'll go to that. How's that? So the overall parcel is 17.27 acres, and here's Blackrock Turnpike to the north. The north directional is to the top right-hand corner of the drawing, and I'm referring to the data accumulation plan that has been filed with the Commission. The property comprises approximately 17.27 acres. The development area that we're talking about is this area in the easterly corner of the property that comprises a total of 2.284 acres. Currently, a small portion of the property is located in the neighborhood design district. That's what's shown right here, and let me just refer to what Walt was just flipping up for me. Just towards the bottom. Here we go. So I'm going to go back to the top one, Walt, just because I think it shows the entire parcel. So the neighborhood design is currently in the darker shaded area here. That comprises 0.66 acres, and the proposal is to change that zone and the balance of the property that's currently located in the RAAA zone to your design commercial center district. And with that, we have again a special permit application for a medical office use where a building will be located in this corner of the property. And again, Mr. Jobs will walk you through that in a moment. The property itself has access to public water and sewer. Currently, what's commonly known, I guess, as the plant factory is located in the northeasterly corner of the property. Across the street, we do have the Hi-Ho Hotel, which is also located in the design commercial, located directly to the north across from Blackrock Turnpike. And just a quick overview of the history. In 2010, there was an application for a medical office use of the subject property, essentially in the same area where it's proposed today. However, at that time, the proposal involved two separate buildings comprising a total of 35,000 square feet. You denied that application. We submitted a new application last November of 2014 where that was reduced to a single building with 25,000 square feet. We did have, I think it was 3 nights of public hearing before the Commission. We responded, we feel, to the questions. that were asked. We did submit essentially the same testimony and evidence that you're going to hear this evening, and you did decide to deny the application. What I would like to note as far as wetlands, in 2010 there was a wetlands approval for that prior application with the two separate buildings. This new proposal with the single building that's before you this evening, we did receive confirmation from the Wetlands Commission that the regulated activities associated with this proposal that's before you tonight are within the scope of the regulated activities. They're substantially and materially the same as the regulated activities that were approved by the Commission, your Conservation Wetlands Commission, back in 2010. And that was appealed by some neighbors in court, the confirmation that it's within, these activities are within those activities. So we have a wetlands approval for the activities associated with this development proposal. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Did you say that that is currently on appeal?
That was appealed, and there's a pending motion to dismiss it at this point in time, but we haven't had that, a court review and act upon that motion to dismiss.
All right. When was the certification? I mean, when was the confirmation received?
I would have to, I can get that information for you. It's in my file. It was earlier this year. I think the appeal was taken back in the spring, back in April or March. I believe it was March. Maybe Mr. Wen has that.
Pending at the time that you were hearing the most recent version of this application.
Right, okay. And it still remains pending?
The appeal itself,
Yeah.
that is correct.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
sir. So we do have a wetlands permit approval for the activities that are associated with this building. What's being proposed to you this evening, and this is outlined at page 3 of the letter that appears as Exhibit 2 in that packet, and this is the cover letter with the narrative that was filed with this application, is that the applicant is willing to put as a condition of approval, if you were to approve the zone change that would rezone this corner of the property to design commercial, and if you were to approve the special permit site plan application for the single building medical office use of 25,000 square feet, as a condition of approval, New Way Associates, Mr. Richter, would agree to place a restriction on the balance of the property that would limit any future development of that property to single-family residential 2-acre building development as currently provided by your AAA zoning regulations, whereby as soon as, and that would be, that restriction would be recorded before anybody could exercise, would acquire a permit under this special permit to start construction. That's when the restrictive covenant would be recorded on the land records. So that is, I would respectfully submit to the Commission, and that change in and of itself is a substantial material change from the prior application that you reviewed. And the reason we did that is it was our understanding that during the deliberations there was concern from a couple of the Commission members anyways, as to what could possibly be developed on the balance of the property, the portion that we're talking about, out to the 14.985 acres that's not subject to the medical office use zone change in that development. So what we came up with was we thought that, well, if we are willing to put as a condition of approval that we have to record a restriction before we can exercise and pull any permits to start construction under that special permit, then that might be enough to satisfy the Commission concerning that one particular component of the development of this overall parcel. So again, what's before you this evening is a zone change for the bottom right-hand portion of the property that comprises approximately 2.28 acres. And as part of that, we would be willing, again, as a condition of an approval, to approve that zone change and the special permit site plan application for the 25,000 square foot medical office use to condition the balance of the property before we could secure or pull any permits to start to exercise any rights under the special permit. So that's a little bit of an overview as to where we were and where we've come from 2010, from earlier this year. What I'd like to do now, with the permission of the chair, is turn the floor or the podium over to Walt Jobst, and Mr. Jobst will walk you through the site development proposal. We did, in talking with your town attorney, we did consider requesting that the commission incorporate the record from the prior application and then just get up and say, this is what we're proposing. But we thought, in deference to the commission, and I don't know if everybody was here the last time, that we will, we'll try to provide a summary and keep it, in a summary fashion, an overview of all the testimony that was presented to the commission in the last go-around. So with permission of the chair, I'll turn the podium over to Mr. Jobst. Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Walter Jobst. I'm a licensed professional engineer and land surveyor in the state of Connecticut. I am employed by the Huntington Company, which has offices here in Fairfield. As Attorney Smith said, property is on the south side of Blackrock Turnpike, just to the west of the Merritt Parkway entrance. It comprises 17.27 acres. The slope is generally from the southwest to the northeast. I have a couple of pocket wetlands and a conservation easement that was filed. Currently, the property houses a nursery and garden shop, have a gravel parking area running parallel with Blackrock Turnpike on the lower portion of the site. There's no drainage structures and no detention structures on the site. Our proposal is to construct a 25,000 square foot office building located in the northeast corner. Be a two-story building with associated parking to the east, north, and west of it. The parking will comprise 125 parking spaces, which meets the zoning requirements for the square footage. We'll also have a new drainage system and new detention system as part of our stormwater management plan. We have a driveway coming more or less in the center of the site at Blackrock Turnpike. This affords us the best sight line, both south or east down Blackrock Turnpike and west up Blackrock Turnpike. Anywhere else on the site or on this street line, you don't have as good a sight line distance.
What are those numbers?
We have 560 feet to the west, and we have 450 feet to the east.
And what are the minimums?
Something less. I think it's 380. We have that in the report. It's being looked up, and we have that
Okay.
figure.
Well, when you find it, if
we'll
you
let
could
you
just
know.
give me that for the record.
Sure. We are providing 5 handicap spaces located at the front entrance. I'm sorry, we're providing 6 handicap spaces at the front entrance. We have a requirement for 5. We're providing 1 extra. And we have pedestrian access, which came out of the process of the hearing last time. Sidewalk that bisects the westerly parking lot and a designated pedestrian walkway which circumvents the building, and both come out at the front entrance. As part of the proposal, we have a stormwater management plan, which will incorporate a detention recharge system and a stormwater treatment train. The detention recharge system is split into two sections. One here at the easterly portion, southeasterly portion of the site, the other here at the corner of the site. Both of these have been designed to treat not only the quantity of water that is going to be generated by the site, but also to address the quality of the water that will be discharged from the site. We've got a three-part treatment train. All of our catch basins that are dispersed throughout the site will have siphon hoods. We have two hydrodynamic separators located at just before the entrance of stormwater into the detention recharge systems, and we have a isolator row in each of these recharge systems as an added backup. We will detain on site the first 1 inch of stormwater discharge, and as I've said in the past, that includes approximately 80 to 85% of any storm events that might occur within the calendar year. We've also designed the detention system to reduce the 2-year post-development discharge to its 1-year pre-development rate, and that is to keep it consistent with the DEP Stormwater Quality Manual. And all other storms will be reduced below their existing rates. We have gas, water, sanitary services available within Blackrock Turnpike. We've also performed a maneuvering study for fire equipment. 4 different studies. One, on your left side, is northbound with a counterclockwise circulation. This is southbound with a counterclockwise circulation. The ones on the right are northbound with a clockwise circulation and southbound with a clockwise circulation for those parking areas.
Do you know where those are in our packets? I'm just trying to follow to find those slides in the packets, and I
don't know where they are in the packets.
Do we have them? I can't seem to find them.
Yeah, I don't. I just flipped through what I could while you were talking to try to follow along, but I don't see the small ones in the. Maybe they're large. Trying to find.
They may not have been included.
Did you
Mr.
resolve
Vertley,
the
what's
issue with the height? The fire department was somewhat concerned about the height of your portico.
As far as I know, the fire department is okay with the maneuvering, the access to the building.
Yeah, because the building code report we have is a little older. He was just questioning it.
We've also met with DOT regarding improvements to Blackrock Turnpike in front of our site. We will be widening Blackrock Turnpike from the intersection with Congress Street up to a portion to the west part of our site. We're providing for northbound traffic on Blackrock Turnpike, a left-hand turn lane, a bypass lane, so that maneuver can be made into the site. For southbound traffic, we have a widening, and that will provide a right-hand turn lane to maneuver into the site.
Could you just hold on 1 second, okay? I'm trying to keep up, but so I'm still looking for the circulation charts, drawings. in the materials in the record. I want to make sure that we have that, and that you're not referring to something that we don't have.
Mr. Chairman, this is the turning radii for the movements
Yes.
internally?
It appears that it was inadvertently left out of that packet. I can leave this with staff this evening and provide them with another dozen copies at 11 by 17 tomorrow morning.
Is it showing this?
Yes, this is
Oh,
it.
what time
Yeah.
is it? Can you see it? You can't.
Well, I can't see it from here. I mean, one of the things that I was looking for was site movement and such, and it's certainly talked about in, the traffic report, but I was looking for that, and I was happy to hear you talking about it, but I couldn't find it in here, and I certainly
Why don't
can't
you
see it
just
from
walk over
here.
and show it to them. Just walking through it.
And then there was another question, thank you.
This is northbound traffic coming in
Yeah.
and making a counterclockwise circuit.
Yeah.
This is southbound traffic coming in and again making a counterclockwise circuit. This is northbound traffic coming in, making a clockwise circuit. And southbound traffic coming in, making a southbound circuit. All those lines are basically the path of the tires.
Great. So that is all around the circulation on the right-hand side?
Yes.
Okay.
Based on what?
Based on a fire apparatus.
That's a fire truck?
Fire truck, yes.
Okay. Now, there was a question, thank you. I think we should probably return to the podium. So there was a question about in the code enforcement, which Commissioner Francis was asking about, the front of the building being able to accommodate fire apparatus. A ladder truck is 13 feet.
Oh, yeah, yes, because there's a porte-cochere here.
Correct.
And there's a circular, called a drop-off here.
Yes.
Traffic, the fire truck does not have to pass under that porte-cochere, but I believe, the architect here?
No, he's not.
No.
But I believe at the, Chris Smith, for the record, Mr. Chairman, during the prior hearing, there was testimony from the architect that would accommodate that an emergency fire truck vehicle could get through.
The porte-cochere would be designed to allow passage of the fire truck underneath that, even though it does not need to do that.
And if you recall, Mr. Chairman, and I did resubmit the code review comments from the last time. Over the course of 3 nights,
Yeah.
I feel that we did address these questions, but I know that was months ago, so, but I just
Exactly.
wanted to, it's not something we were ducking, but I know that we had submitted that before, and we had a list of responses to it, and we did have testimony at the last time, but
Right.
that was...
And I was just looking to confirm that, because
Okay.
that frankly was my recollection as well, but didn't really hear a direct, answer to that question in the affirmative. Another thing that we talked about at a prior hearing was the traffic flow on the other side of the parking lot. And I seem to recall that there was a reconfiguration of some of the spots there to provide for a T.
We reconfigured this portion of the parking lot
Right.
to allow a 3-point turn.
Right. And that still remains in
That still
its plan,
remains
right?
as is,
Right.
or as it was.
Okay. Yeah. Commissioner Francis. Well, Commissioner Josie, are you familiar with the trash removal locations and such?
Dumpster is located right here.
Right, and the rubbish truck will have to do the three-point turn, and it's determined to do
Depends
that?
depends on the truck. A lot of them are front load, and they pull the dumpster container out, drive forward, engage, dump it, pull back, and then push the container back into its spot in here. So it's easily accessible by the waste.
Now, will the
hauler.
cars using the left-hand parking lot have to do three-point turns if they can't find a parking space?
The parking stalls end here, just before the dumpster.
Yeah,
You would make the maneuver that you would in any other parking lot. You pull out, back up, and then drive out this way.
Okay.
And all of these parking stalls, as well as these, you would make the same maneuver.
and is that side going to be more for staff, the left side?
This side here,
Yeah.
I don't
And
know.
it seems like it's a lot harder to access.
I mean, it could very well be employee parking here, and then this would be for patient parking, much more readily accessible to the front
At least you
entrance.
can circumvent the center aisle on that half. All right, thank you. I was particularly interested in the trash.
Mr. Corcoran?
Yeah, just continuing on that. So the rubbish truck, where does it make the three-point turn? It looks like the,
Go into here,
and then what?
back into here,
Where the container is?
well, to the other side of the container.
There's enough room there?
Container just
I see.
that one.
And so if it were a front-loading,
That's here, and then makes the maneuver out.
if it were a front-loading truck, the container would be moved differently? Placed
Yeah,
differently?
we could place that differently, yes.
And if you drive into that parking lot and you don't find the space, then you go down to the end and do the same thing the rubbish truck would do?
If you're in a passenger car or SUV or whatever, come in here, there's no space, you do the same thing. Go into here, back up, come out.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see.
Mr. Jost, just for the record, how big of an area is that?
How big of an area is this?
Yeah.
It's, this is roughly 90 to 95 feet,
There's plenty of room.
so there's plenty of room.
Plenty of room.
That's fine. So, I'm looking at an old one. I'm just getting a little confused with the January 2015, supplemental submission on the response to the code review, and some of the maps don't have the pedestrian walkway in the middle of the parking lot.
The pedestrian walkway was added during the course of
Yeah.
the last hearing, so those might predate that revision.
They do. For the record,
Yeah,
Mr.
that's what
Chairman.
I want to see. Where
There
is
you
that?
go.
That plan is not here.
Where is that map right there with all those trees?
I know we have copies for you, but that's where we ended up with at the end of the hearing.
That's
the
what I
last
wanna
go-around.
see.
We're looking for.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because we did add that walkway to comply with your new regulation that had come into effect. and-
Yeah, no,
yes.
and so this gives me, it gives all of us, not just an overview of the parking lot, the flow, the parking spaces, the shade trees, the pedestrian walkway, I mean, it really gives the,
This one works better.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And we have the elevations here as well. Okay, thank you.
That's okay. We finally found the answer to your previous question on
Sightline.
sightline distance.
Yeah,
Page 24 of the traffic study, Mr. Chairman.
thank you.
The 85th percentile speed, whatever it is, 40 miles per hour, requires a sightline distance of 445 feet. And we exceed that. We're 560 and 450.
So how much do you exceed it by? 5 feet. 5 feet.
And that's looking in a easterly direction, I believe. In the westerly direction, we have over 500 now.
Right.
To the east, where we have the traffic signals, in the intersection, we have 450 feet, so we exceed the minimum requirement by 5 feet. To the west, we have 560 feet.
Right. And that 85th percentile is based upon the posted speed limit or the measured speed?
I believe that was measured.
Measured?
That was measured.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Calabrese.
To the east, the 450 feet, do we end up losing sight because of the bridge?
No.
No.
I mean, eventually it cuts it off, but it's well beyond.
That's beyond the
the minimum requirement, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, our 450 is to this. That's where it is. Also, a landscape plan has been prepared by Wesley Stout Associates, and I believe complies with all the pertinent zoning requirements. We have 125 parking spaces, which would require 13 shade trees. We have a minimum of 20 shade trees dispersed throughout both parking areas. And then we have all the other nice little plants, which I won't go into. We have a bicycle rack, which is located, or bicycle racks, which are located in this vicinity here, near the entrance, for those so inclined. And we have a photometric plan that was prepared by Apex Lighting Solutions. And that shows that all light generated by the proposed lighting will be confined to the site. And lastly, as Attorney Smith said, the development of the remaining portion of the site, the 14-plus acres, will be restricted to AAA zoning requirements. If there's no further questions,
Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. George? Yes, Commissioner Francis. Use the microphone.
One more from the code review. It says the area is steep and needs a reduction in grade. Now, I heard you say you're installing a turn lane. Is the road being leveled at all? Blackrock Turnpike.
Blackrock Turnpike is...
It's steep. Yeah, the police
No, what-
report recommended.
Right. Their concern was in this area here. We spoke with the DOT to get their take on what they would require, saying it's a state road. We spoke with the town engineering department, and it was concluded that to address that concern by the police department, we would put in a bypass lane for essentially northbound traffic, so that whoever is making a left-hand turn, they can be passed to the right.
Which most people will be.
Which most people will. We'll be widening Blackrock. We won't be changing the
grade.
the grades, but we'll be changing the width to accommodate that.
You're gonna be moving your curb cut in, is basically what you're gonna be doing. You're gonna be moving your curb cut in?
We'll be moving our curb cut in. Okay. You can see it here, this hatched area
Yeah.
along the front of our site will be the new widening of the road.
That's a, one-car entrance, one-car exit?
Here?
Yes. The new proposal, okay.
Yeah, 24-foot wide, one way in, one way out.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question. Looking at the same drawing that you were just looking at, I see toward the front there's a concrete sidewalk and then a new concrete sidewalk. Do they connect up? I'm just having trouble deciphering the well.
Where do they go to?
No, do they connect with one another?
With one another?
They don't look like they do.
Across the, well, because of the widening of the road, they're not a straight shot connect, but they'll come down here and then connect across this way to the block here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Jobs? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will. For the record, Chris Smith, to answer your question, Mr. Chair, as far as when the wetlands appeal was filed, that was filed by complaint on March 31st, 2015.
Thank you.
So that was before your vote, which occurred in April of this year, April 15th, I believe it was. What I'd like to do now is have our architect, Ron Gooden, come take the podium and then walk you through the architectural. I think Ron can respond specifically to your question, Mr. Chair. And there was another question from another commissioner member. I apologize, but as to the height
Yes.
relative to accommodating emergency vehicles. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Just give me 2 seconds.
I think so. Down here for
I'll lift it up. For the record and for remembrance for a little while ago, Ron Gooden, Principal Healthcare for Fletcher Thompson Architects. I know a good portion of the folks were here, but I see some new faces as well, so I'm going to do a quick review of kind of the architecture and the look we were going for. The initial move is basically to use a lot of materials and styles, roof lines, and general architecture in general to kind of make it feel more of a colonial feel versus more of a boxy, medical office building look in an attempt to fit in a little bit more with the adjacent architecture. You'll see the use of stone. There's a board, I believe the one that's centered up there, and I can certainly lift that up if folks need to or share it with the camera if you'd like. But we're talking about clapboard siding, which is that kind of Cape Codish blue color, white trim, the stonework obviously, shingles that would blend with local architecture as well. And we're looking at the opportunity to perhaps introduce some solar shingles on some of the lesser pitched areas up in these dormers, in the shed dormers, so that we're able to maybe drive some of the emergency power items and things like that for the building. Additionally, we're trying to fit it into the site so that it sits up there nicely, but obviously doesn't become too imposing as well. As far as the porte cochere, we will be designing that for full accessibility for the fire truck. I believe it was 12.6 or 13 feet. It's been a little while since I've 13. Thank
So
you.
the code enforcement minutes speak to 13 feet.
Yes, yeah.
So what is the height of the portico there?
We'll be bringing that to 13 feet exactly.
13 feet,
Yep,
okay, very good.
for clearance.
Is that in the plan, or is that something that needs to be adjusted in the plan?
I think that's right around 13 feet right now. I'd have to look back at the exact elevations, but I recall it being either 12, 10, or 13 feet, right in that ballpark. If it has to move up a couple inches to get that 13 inches clear, will absolutely be done, which I think we mentioned in the meetings in the past.
And just, I'm sorry, for clarification, Chris Smith, that if there were to be an approval, that will be at 13 feet.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you.
Absolutely. One thing we did in addition, I believe it's the board below me here, yes, is we did a little quick study just to make sure that the air handlers would not be visible from the road. So you'll see two views there, and the air handlers appropriately sized for the building. There's one perspective that looks basically from the top of the road on the north side coming down. That's that kind of long view one. I'm trying to remember which one it is. Down here on the bottom. Thank you. So the view with the long line is the one coming down the hill looking towards the roof, and you'll see clearance of the roof edge and not visible, the air handler. And then the opposite one down here in this corner, which is the middle perspective, is from the light, basically. So as you're sitting there in the car and looking up at the building, again, the air handlers would not be visible. So again, you know, materials that are local that will help the building fit in, size, form, shape, all that in a style that's more of a colonial style or to fit with the local architecture.
Are those the drainage pavers?
I'm trying to see which one.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
In the parking lot, are those drainage pavers? Up there.
That's the roof shingles.
Oh,
Those are actually the solar roof shingles.
Oh, wow.
They're made to look,
they look like
they really hide them. It's amazing these days. And again, those will be up on such a high plane that you'll never see those from the road. It's just a new technology that's out there. That's something we'll be investigating as part of the design process.
Commissioner Corcoran.
Thanks. I have a question about the materials on the side of the building.
Mm-hmm.
You said they're local materials, but are these natural materials or man-made materials?
We haven't gotten to the actual specifications of that yet. They could, I think we're anticipating a stone veneer product, and then the siding, we were anticipating probably a cement fiberboard type product, which actually holds up better than a lot of the natural products, but holds the paint or the stain just as well.
Do you have a sense of what these products look like after 20 years? I mean, like an artificial stone product?
Yeah, there's a lot of places where they're installed. Trying to think of a local, probably even on some of the schools here in town. I think our firm might have actually even done this school, as a matter of fact. It's something that's been in use for a long time. They're making them out of precast concrete even now and putting aggregate in it and even granite dust to make them look even more realistic. And they do hold up quite well. And just like anything, it comes down to maintenance and keeping the building up.
And the white trim towards the top third of the building, that's AZEK or something like that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Does anyone else have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll hear from our, for the record, Chris Smith, our traffic engineer, Mr. Steve Chipola from Frederick P. Clark Associates, who's pinch hitting for Michael Ante this evening. Thank you.
Anytime you want.
Good evening. For the record, Steve Cipolla, Frederick Clark Associates. We prepared the traffic impact study for the proposed 25,000 square foot medical office building. Just for reference purposes, the site is here. You have the Hi-Ho Motel across the street, and you have the interchange with the Merritt Parkway, Blackrock Turnpike. We looked at the 4 signalized intersections, and we also looked at the driveway across from our site for the Hi-Ho Motel. Our traffic counts from 2011, we reviewed and compared them to the latest Connecticut Department of Transportation ATR data for the area, which includes both ramps and mainline volumes, which are from 2012 and 2013. That comparison showed that our 2011 base volumes were higher than what DOT counted in 2012 and 2013. So we used our 2011 volumes as a conservative base. The peak hours were found to be 7:45 to 8:45 a.m., and the weekday afternoon was 4:45 to 5:45 p.m. Just to get an idea of the amount of traffic on Blackrock Turnpike in front of our site, it carries approximately 1,000 vehicles both directions during the morning peak and approximately 800 vehicles during the PM peak hour. To grow our traffic volumes to a design year of 2016, we added a annual growth rate of 0.5% per year, which was verified with historical Connecticut Department of Transportation volumes, and we believe that that was an appropriate growth. We also added traffic for the girls softball field, which at the time wasn't built when our base volumes were counted, so we included that in our background. Then site traffic for a medical building of 25,000 square feet. A building of that size will generate a total of 60 vehicles during the weekday morning and 84 vehicles during the PM peak hour. We distributed the site traffic to the area roadways. Summary, 40% will come to and from the site via the Merritt Parkway. 40% will come via the south and east on the Blackrock Turnpike, with 10% coming from the north and west of the site. Review of the impacts between a no-build condition without the site and a build condition with the proposed medical office building shows that with the medical office building, level of service will remain in acceptable levels with minimal increase in vehicle delay. As most of you may know, it's a very high traffic area, but all four of those traffic signals work together and help to process the traffic, and it works very well during peak hours. We looked at the latest accident data from Connecticut DOT 2010 to 2012, and that showed that the levels of accidents were in acceptable levels. As Mr. Jobs mentioned, proposed mitigation is to add I guess it's a westbound left turn bypass lane to allow through volume traffic to bypass cars waiting to make a left turn into the site. If there's any questions?
Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you, Steve. For the record, again, Chris Smith. One of the things that I think Ron would just like to show you is the screening, that sight line from the Merritt Parkway. I know that's always a concern, and we had done that for the public hearing with the prior application, but I would just, with permission of the chair, would like to have Mr. Gooden come up and just explain that and walk you through it. Thank you.
Yes. This is just a footnote to the traffic engineer. We have a question for traffic before we continue.
Thanks.
Commissioner Cannelli.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I just, Paul, just so I'm clear, are you familiar with the work done on the previous application that was presented to us, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted, just for my own purposes, just to make it clear for the record, the sightline distances we were presented with are 560 westbound, 450 eastbound. What were they in the previous application? What were in the previous application that you tested for? What were those sightlines in the previously.
I believe the driveway was in the same position
Right.
Mr. Jobst mentioned.
So the sightlines are identical to what they were last time?
Correct, yes, the driveway.
Sightlines distance, sight
Yeah,
distance.
yes, the driveway.
Nothing has changed since the last.
Yeah, no, the
application.
driveway's in the same position.
Absolutely the same?
Yes.
As the one from the
As
last
the pre-
rejected application? Okay.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And
Thanks.
the traffic report is the same one they've been filing.
Same one, okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Great. Sorry, thanks.
Yeah.
Get all this fun data out of there.
Again, Ron Gooden from Fletcher Thompson. Just to share one final rendering with you. If you are driving along southbound down the Merritt and you have the ability to magically stop your car for half a second in between some of the trees that are out there, basically as you cross the bridge, that's kind of your view. So they asked me just to put that up on the board once. The ones on the site, I believe, are correct, all deciduous. Up on the Merritt itself, there are quite a few pines there, on both sides, left and right of the opening.
This is what I'll see, but this is what I'll see when there's leaves up.
Correct.
Leaves are down, I'll see branches and more filled.
Yeah, but actually, driving by there, I've noticed that a good portion of the trees to the right and to the left of the bridge itself are actually pines, so they'll be keeping their needles through, unless there's some attack on the pines, but typically, even through the winter, it'll be substantially blocked.
Any questions? Thank you.
For the record, again, Chris Smith on behalf of the owner applicant. Just a few closing comments for our presentation. As the commission is aware, Mr. Richter is a Fairfield resident and a developer in Fairfield, and I think everyone is aware of the many efforts that Mr. Richter has gone to in engaging his neighbors relative to the development of this particular site and with the development of this parcel in that small area in the northeast corner. And I'd like to just, I don't know, Walt, if we have the site plan, but, and as I indicated this at the close of the last hearing, the nearest neighbor to this medical office building is literally 470 feet away. For somebody who always uses football fields, I mean, it's it's like 1.5 football fields away. So if you were standing at one end zone at Giant Stadium, it would be the whole length and then another half of the distance to the nearest residential home located to the northwest. The Merritt Parkway Conservancy, Mr. Richter had engaged them extensively back in 2010. Just everything that he was asked to do as far as the landscaping enhancements, they were incorporated into this plan. And I think the end result, I know it's a snapshot, but if you happen to be driving the speed limit and going by at 55 and happen to glance over, that's what you're going to see when the leaves are up. But that was something that was a concern to the Merritt Conservancy and to Mr. Richter, and he went to great lengths to incorporate landscaping to help result in this type of a sightline screening. You have condos up to the northwest. Don't forget, this property goes up, so there's a natural topographical boundary between this limited area of site development on this parcel of 17 acres plus in the development up to the west. The Greenfield Village Improvement Association, great intentions, they do great work. What did we hear from them the last time, and you may hear from them again tonight, is their concern with precedent with a zone change. I mean, there's absolutely no precedent with a zone change. If this commission grants a zone change as to one property, nobody can walk in and say, well, you did it for Chris down the road, so you have to do it for Walt on my property. There's just, from a legal standpoint, there's absolutely no precedent, and all uses permitted in this district, the design commercial, are subject to special permit approval, and as everyone in this room knows, and the commission in particular, that provides you with fairly extensive discretion when you're reviewing a particular site proposal. In the proposal, let's remember please, is for a small portion. It's 2.28 acres. Most of the people in this room, probably your home is bigger than that. Your residential parcel could very well be larger than that. It's a very small area, and your own regulations provide if the development doesn't occur within 5 years, then it reverts back to the prior zone designation. So there really isn't, there shouldn't be any, that really shouldn't be, with all due respect, a basis for a denial from the commission as someone's concerned about the precedent that may be created if indeed you were to approve this request tonight. And we have designed commercial across the street and a commercial development. If you talk about a master plan for this area, which was a concern of some of the commissioners the last time, you have Hi-Ho, they're renovating. They don't seem to be tearing it down and doing something different. That use is staying there. You would have a medical office here, and then you would have a deed-restricted property for the balance of this property relative to, again, the 2-acre residential use going forward. So that whole concern about what's happening in this very, very small corridor along the Merritt Parkway and Blackrock Turnpike, I think I would respectfully suggest that it's been addressed. And it will be addressed with this condition of approval that we are talking about and are willing to have incorporated as a condition of approval. I would respectfully submit to the commission that the zone change request is consistent with your comprehensive plan, which is your, as you know, are your zoning regulations and your zone map. This is already a split zone property. You're just it's going to remain a split zone property. You have commercial across the street, so it's certainly consistent with that. I would respectfully submit that it's consistent with your plan of conservation and development, where you talk about having as a guideline and a goal is regional small neighborhood uses along this area of the Merritt. I would respectfully submit this is not a huge medical office complex. It's a 25,000 square foot building. It's been reduced, the initial proposal, 2 separate buildings, 35,000 square feet in total. And most importantly, you're promoting, this promotes, and you would be promoting, regional health care facility use to service not only the citizens of Fairfield, but also other folks in the region, and that is a specific goal in your POCD, and it's right at page 59. The other one that I talked about was at page 34. So I would respectfully submit that it's consistent with your plan of conservation and development. I would respectfully submit another component of a zone change test, that this is certainly not creating an adverse public health safety issue. There's no problem with traffic. It's not going to have an adverse impact on any of the adjacent properties. Again, the closest one, the residential home, is 470 feet away. You have a natural topographic buffer, the condos to the west, and you have, I would respectfully suggest, appropriate screening occurring on the Merritt Parkway, and you're eliminating a historic use of the property. That's probably something everybody would like to see not there, and have a nice professional medical office use being made of the property. Now, although it's not required for a zone change, I respectfully submit that there is a need for this use in this area, and I would, with the permission of the chair, I'd like to submit into the record a letter that we had submitted into the record at the prior hearing. Again, this isn't required for a zone change. I would like to note that indeed, if there isn't a need, if you were to approve this, and there isn't a need there, even though Mr. Richter believes there is, this would simply, if it's not used, your approval within a certain time period, 5 years, it's going to revert back to the current zoning designation. So there's really no loss to the commission. But again, I wouldn't be standing here on behalf of Mr. Richter if he didn't believe that there is a marketing need for this use for this property. So with permission of the chair, again, it's something that was submitted into the record the last time. It's a letter, just for the record, from Sean McDonald of Avison Young. It's dated February 23rd, 2015. And I'll just leave it out.
Yep. Can I ask a question about this?
We can.
Okay, thanks. Was this the gentleman? Okay, I just wanted to ask, is this the gentleman who spoke before us last time? Right, for you, as essentially talking about his view of the market, I think it was?
Yes. Well, I'm going to give you his letter. Yes.
We can take one and pass it down. You can give us a stat. Yep, thank you.
I have a question as well, but it's going to be directed towards staff. Is that okay?
Yep, that's fine. Just let's just let him finish his.
Sure.
His, ask questions.
Everybody get it? Again, it's dated February 23rd, 2015, from Mr. Sean McDonald of Avis and Young. And 4 paragraphs down in Fairfield presently, there are approximately 5 medical office options available. All but one are less than 5,000 square feet in total. The largest contiguous assemblage of space in Fairfield is approximately 8,000 square feet and boasts a parking ratio of roughly 4 to 1,000 square feet, 4 spaces to 1,000 square feet, and it is on a second floor, which limits the potential uses. And then he goes on to state that specializing in medical office space for over a decade, I presently have a requirement for a building and space of 15 to 25,000 square feet in eastern Fairfield County, and you just don't have that in Fairfield at this point in time. So there is a need for this type of use. This is from a broker who specializes in this type of use that we're talking about. Most importantly, again, Mr. Richter would not have us all here this evening with this application and this request if he didn't feel that there is a need and that he has potential users for this use of the property. And again, if indeed you were to approve this and it was an exercise, it would simply, after a set period of time, by your own regulations, just revert back to its current status. So that concludes our presentation, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, and thank you for your time.
Okay, great. We just have a couple of questions. Commissioner Canelli?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, I want to talk to you about the zone change. Currently, you've got about, I guess about 6/10 or 7/10 of an acre that's neighborhood design business district. I guess you're familiar with the history here. You obviously know that the application that preceded the one that you shepherded, you're familiar with that, right?
We kind of just did a little overview of that
right.
before
So you're familiar.
you got here about the...
No, my point is, I'm just establishing that I can talk to you a little bit about the progression here on the building.
From what I understand, yes.
Okay, great.
I wasn't here for that, but...
Point being just simply that we had in our first proposal regarding this, the regional medical center, the first proposal was to essentially change the rules in neighborhood design business districts to allow larger professional office complexes, and then just to expand to the size that would be necessary on the site. And so you'd go from 7/10 of an acre to 2.5 acres, and ultimately the commission felt that doing that broadly across town wouldn't be a good idea to up the size of what we could allow in terms of the NDBD. Now, this is the second This is the second effort at making a conversion of the NDBD and some AAA zone to CD, I guess, to Design Commercial District (DCD). Here's the question I'm getting to. You mentioned just a little bit in your summation that the largest block of space currently economically viable for medical space is 8,000 square feet amassed, correct? Is that correct?
That's correct.
In Fairfield, according to your research. The
That's-
neighborhood design business district, if we just simply expanded this neighborhood design business district to give you 2.26 acres of neighborhood design business district, that could handle a 14,000 square foot professional office building under our regulations. 14,000 square feet. So that would make a medical office building that would be nearly, about 80% bigger than anything we have in Fairfield. However, what you're asking for on behalf of your client is to is to not expand the neighborhood design business district, but to create a new commercial district out of an area that's now residential and neighborhood design business district. And on a 2.26 acre parcel, that would allow, if say this venture didn't work out, but you had 5 years to figure out what would allow an FAR of 149,000 square feet and a coverage area of about 75,000 feet. So by giving Mr. Richter this zone change, changing the historic neighborhood design business district and AAA zoning there, what could actually happen, because, I mean, medical office, I think a lovely, inside our regs, NDBD district building that served Fairfield, I'd be glad to support that as a matter of zoning. But what you're asking me to support is not a medical office building, a change in the zoning to design commercial district, in which over the next 5 years, if medical doesn't work out, and there's a lot of different competing opinions as we have from the record at the last public hearing about what's large, what's the best approach. Some folks believe that the future of medicine is going to be in tiny facilities. We've approved those. Some in moderate-sized facilities. We've approved those. But what we will do, regardless of what happens about the medical building, is for the next 5 years, your client will no longer have a AAA zone property and a small neighbor design business district property, but a commercial property in which they could do a structure that would have an FAR of almost 150,000 square feet and a coverage area of 75, if they built out. Now, the issue would be, I guess, how much parking you'd have. The issue would be how much parking you would have. You'd have to be able to park it. But you do have a ton of land out there that the one deed restriction we're talking about surrounding it would be that it stays AAA. But it's not going to be anything that we can enforce necessarily. You're offering a deed restriction. Somebody could come back in 3 years with a completely different commission and say, well, you know, we've decided that, you know, we already gave us the commercial zone, but you know what, 25,000 square feet is not going to cut it. And this is a commercial zone, and we're entitled to do 75,000 square feet. We're only going to do 60,000 square feet. We're going to need a little bit more parking, but guess what? We have plenty of land. So if you really, and your client is really interested in a modest proposal, my question is, why not simply go for an expansion of just this neighborhood design business district, which was not what was proposed 2 cycles ago, and then build an office building that would still be 80% bigger than than the largest office medical office building we have in the town of Fairfield now? Why not?
Well, before we get into the specifics,
Sure.
just from that legal standpoint, which is why I'm here,
Sure.
is that I think you and all the commissioners, and certainly your professional staff, Mr. Demonchek and Mr. Wendt, are well aware of the discretion that is vested in you, this commission, relative to any request for a change of zone, which is pretty much denied because the moon's blue. And that's generally going, there's only been one case where a trial court reversed the denial and approved it. And when it went up to the Supreme Court, it was dismissed on other grounds because of an environmental intervention. It's the only time in the history of zoning in Connecticut that happened. But other than that, and so that issue was never raised, thank goodness, because I represented the client before the Supreme Court, because I think they just would have reversed the trial court's ordering of that zone change approval. It just doesn't happen. And anybody could come in and ask for it anyways, but you have absolute discretion. So if this were to be this small acreage of 2.284 acres, were to be the zone change were to be approved, you and the rest of the commission have absolute discretion. If anybody returns and says, well, just using your hypothetical in your scenario, well, you know, we've got all this other land, we'd like to expand the design commercial to include some of that because we need parking because we're going to exercise whatever rights we might have under it. So, I mean, you have total discretion on that. And that goes to this Greenfield, the Improvement Association, and this great concern, and I think I heard it from you during the public hearing the last time, and I certainly respect it. I've been doing it for a long time, and it's not the first time I've heard it, and the concern. But the answer is, from a legal and practical standpoint, you just don't have to say yes to any future expansion of that zone. And then relative to any uses under the design commercial, it's special permit. And my guess is this commission has probably reviewed quite a number of special permit applications and has said no, because you don't think it's appropriate for the particular neighborhood. And remember, site plan is automatic if you meet the requirements, so you've in theory have said, okay, all these types of uses, if it's site plan only, you only need site plan approval, because we think these uses are good for the property. Special permit, we're not sure. This zone's all over our town, and we want to have the ability to say no if somebody wants to put a pharmacy or you know, whatever it might be, a car wash on a particular site, because you just don't think it's appropriate for the DC property here, but it might be appropriate somewhere along Route 1, for example, in that type of hypothetical. So you have that discretion. And that's why in my summary I pointed that out, because I tried to address that concern of yours in particular the last go around. So I would, this is what's needed. Obviously, the last time it was a request to amend the neighborhood design business district, where a larger medical office use could be made within that district, and this commission said, you know, we really don't think that's a good idea for our neighborhood design district, because that's just going to apply throughout town. So Mr. Richter returned and said, okay, well, I can make it work in this one.
The thing is, I just want to bring you back to the question, which is this. I hear you, because again, if somebody came to me with a 14,000 or 13,900 square foot medical office building that could be put inside an NDBD, that where I didn't have to dramatically expand the size of NDBD's allowances for that kind of a building, I'd say bully. And here's the thing that I find interesting. In the letter that you provided to us that was sent to Mr. Barnhart by the broker, he wrote here in the second to last paragraph, specializing in medical office space for over a decade, I presently have a requirement for 15 to 25,000 square feet in eastern Fairfield County. And my question to you is here we are where if you were able just to simply expand the neighborhood design business district that's existing, rather than seeking this commercial district that does at least leave the possibility open to some future horrible commission allowing buildings as big as 75,000 coverage and 150,000 FAR with the right changes. Why not simply, and you already mentioned that 8,000 square feet is the largest block of space in town for medical office. If 15,000 to 25,000 is the range, why not simply present us with a project that would keep in close to that range, 15,000 is the range bottom, and then still be able to meet this requirement we have for a neighborhood design business district without putting us, those of us concerned about this, having concerns about whether the future might hold a larger building down the line in that space. Why not just do that? I mean, is there any other evidence that there's a need for 25,000 versus, say, 14 or 15,000 that we might not have to go through this?
Well, two things. To answer the last part first, as Mr. McDonald indicates at the top of the letter, and as he indicates at the bottom, the sentence you just read that I had read to the commission, there's a need for larger medical office space. That's where things are going. That's what our whole healthcare practice does at our firm. With all these mergers that are going on and expansions, all the small practices are combining into larger practices, and that's what's happening. This is the model. This in the 25,000 square feet, and that's why we're before you. If there were to be a rogue commission down the road, if we had this change to neighborhood design, Commissioner Kennelly, and one of the future commission went rogue, so we're going to redesign, we're going to let you, somebody comes in, Mr. Richter comes in and says, you know what, I'd like the whole property to be designed commercial, or industrial something or other, and they went ahead and approved it, I suppose that could happen. What's nice with this is you have it limited to this area, this particular zone, and you're going to have a deed restriction on the balance of the property where it's going to be limited to single-family 2-acre zoning uses going forward. That's a condition of approval. It would run in favor of the commission. It's tied to this approval. If there's a violation, you guys enforce it. You just say you're in violation of your special permit approval. So that kind of protects, I would hope, that would protect it. Go ahead.
I have one more, and that's just simply, I just want to mention, you mentioned how there's been a movement towards reducing the structure. Now, the original project was 35, and this is 25. I have an answer, by the way, but we're not here to debate what the answer is to why 14 or 15 wasn't okay and 25 was, but that's not what we're here to do, debate. But my question that I was going to get to was just, you acknowledged that most of the 35,000 square feet that we were talking about that's been removed was a garage structure that was integral to the original design, and now that parking is out. That's what's changed. In terms of the structure, it wasn't as though the capacity to serve as a regional medical center has been reduced. What was reduced was where the parking was, right? That's essentially it.
I think you had two buildings.
Two buildings, but how much of it was parking? Do you recall? No? Yeah.
I'm just the country land use attorney. Let's get the engineer up here.
Yeah. Because it was a garage structure. Yeah, Mr. Jones?
Mr. Richter just reminded me that the initial, under the neighborhood design, if you included the garage, the underground or low-level garage structure in there, the total floor area was 55,000.
Oh, wow, okay.
So the 35,000 square feet...
is truly 10,000 down from...
Yes.
From that?
That is just strictly people floor area.
Okay.
And did not include any of the garage.
So the garage space is about 20,000?
Correct.
Okay, great, thanks.
And they needed the garage to support the additional floor area.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner Calabrese has a question for staff.
Well, if I haven't forgotten my question by now, I'll do my best to remember it. Directing this one towards the staff, with the deed restriction, how much does that help us if we made that a conditional of approval? I mean, can we really enforce that?
Discuss with the town attorney, and if you do make it a conditional approval, we'll have an opinion on that. I think what's important to understand, though, is it could be used as a reason for denying your proposed zone change. Say someone came back 2 or 3 years from now, and they said, well, we want a zone change the rest of your property to commercial. Not only could you say it's not consistent with our plans of development or what we want to happen as a master plan for this area, but you can also say that it's a conditional approval for this property that it can only be maintained for 4 years. So, I mean, that's our enforcement aspect. But the actual legal, that's something that you get a legal opinion from.
So if we have a question for the applicant's counsel about their interpretation on that point, feel free. But the kind of question that you just asked of staff, and by and large what Commissioner Kennelly was just discussing, I think is really for our executive session when we debate these issues and consider this on the merits. So is there anything
And
you'd
if
like
I
to
may,
add to
Mr.
that?
Chairman, well, I did speak with your town attorney, Attorney Lesser, this afternoon, as recently as this afternoon, and I have talked with him about this particular issue a few times over the past month and a half or number of months. But it's certainly his opinion that if there's a condition of approval that the deed restriction, again, has to be recorded before the permit is exercised. So if there's an approval, that would be a condition so that if Mr. Richter were to come in and say, I'd like to pull a building permit to start work, it's like, well, that's fine, but until you record the restriction. So the restriction wouldn't go on immediately. It would be tied to the use of the special permit use. That could run in favor of the commission and or the town, and either one of you would have the ability to enforce that restriction, in addition to being a condition of approval, which you would be in if Mr. Richter is in violation of his condition of approval, cease and desist order gets issued.
Right.
If he's in violation or subsequent owner, it wouldn't be Mr. Richter, of course. If there was a problem with the restrictive covenant, there's the rights to go to court directly on that, never mind through the zoning enforcement. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword that could be used in that particular situation. So it's a little belt and suspender approach. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for the applicant? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any member of the public that wishes to be heard on this application?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Bruce McDonald. I live at 74 Hamilton Court in Fairfield. That's one of the 100 homes that's part of Greenfield Hunt, which is the condominium association that Mr. Smith just referred to. Greenfield Hunt immediately adjacent to this property, so I am a neighbor that's very concerned. I support this application for the zoning change. I think it's a preferable use of that property and certainly for the use to build a 25,000 square foot medical office building. I say it's preferable because what's there now is really derelict property, and although the health department has been not able to classify it as such, is an eyesore. It's been there for a long time. I've lived in this community for 37 years, but in Greenfield Hunt for the last 10, and I've seen this deteriorate. I think it's time to make a change to that property. The other is, I think, probably because if the remainder of the property is zoned and left zoned as AAA residential, that it will preserve the wooded character of that landscaping so that it'll benefit the Merritt Parkway, it'll benefit the immediate neighbors. Speaking to the need for a medical office building and a single-use medical office building, there are very few single-use medical office buildings in the town of Fairfield. The Commission has recently approved the conversion of the Blends store to a single-use medical office building. And of course the OSG, which is the former Sims factory, which is a large single-use medical office building. There is none in this end of the town. I've been in healthcare in this community for the past 37 years, initially as a community practitioner, but then subsequently as a healthcare provider within a hospital. And I have watched the evolution of the practice of medicine, and to quote what people have already said, the small individual practices up and down Blackrock Turnpike will not remain as small individual practices. For the convenience of patients, physicians are coming together. Patients want their primary care, their specialty and subspecialties in the same office, and they want the ancillary. So I think there's a need for this in this medical office building. I suspect that Mr. Richter has a tenant, but I don't know if it's single use or individual doctors. But physician practices are joining large groups. So once again, I thank you for the time, and I also thank the Commission for agreeing to hear this, because I know you did not have to hear it to sit through this, so thank you very much.
Thanks. And Dr. McDonald, just for the record, I think you didn't say your name.
Bruce McDonald, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Anyone else wish to be heard on this item? Please.
My name's Gordon Mckenzie. I am a resident also at Greenfield Hunt, 11 Palmer Bridge. I drive by the property that you're reviewing 5 to 6 times a day. And I can tell you that we see things changing for the positive in our neighborhood. The road, as you know, Blackrock, has been repaved. Even the Hi-Ho Motel is going through a major renovation. And what we see on the property today, you've heard, is an eyesore. It is worse than that. It is a blight. It's a blight on the property, a blight to the neighbors, and a blight to the town of Fairfield. Has every one of you gone to see this property? If not, I hope you do it. It consists of structures that are built with bent piping, covered by polyethylene tarps that are stained and with holes in them. And it is a disgrace, and something should be done about it, no matter what decision comes out in this process. The other point I'd like to make is that, you know, the town is going through a reassessment evaluation of properties. And what you probably have heard already is that the assessment of high-end houses, those over $1 million, is dropping by 10%. This is not unique to Fairfield. It's something going on in many of the communities in Fairfield. That means their property taxes drop by 10%. What's going to happen to the houses under that level of value is that the prices, the property tax itself is probably going to rise 3 to 5%. So with that in mind, I believe this structure that you've been reviewing provide a very badly needed source of property tax income to the town of Fairfield. It won't make up the gap, but it would certainly be a step financially for the town in the right direction. So I'm here to say we support the applicant's request for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to be heard on this?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Joel Green. I practice law in Bridgeport with the law offices of Green and Gross. It's my pleasure to appear before you this evening on behalf of the Merritt Parkway Conservancy and the Greenfield Hill Village Improvement Society. The Merritt Parkway Conservancy is a Connecticut corporation whose mission is to protect, preserve, and enhance the historic Connecticut roadway through education, advocacy, and partnership. The mission of Greenfield Hill Village Improvement Society for over 115 years has been to maintain the historic, beautiful, and rural character of Greenfield Hill and to protect the interests of residents and property owners of Greenfield Hill for the general benefit and improvement of both Greenfield Hill and the town as a whole. I am at a loss as to why we are here this evening. I don't know why we are here. In April of this year, this commission denied the identical application that this applicant submitted. The reasons for denial were as follows. The proposal is not consistent with the plan of conservation and development. You made that finding, you voted on it. Time, experience, and responsible planning for contemporary or future conditions do not indicate the need for the proposed zone change. Circumstances in the neighborhood have not changed substantially enough to merit the requested zone change. 4, it has not been demonstrated that the proposed zone change is warranted and would serve the general health, welfare, and safety of the town. 5, the proposed zone change promotes a level of development that would not serve to protect property values in the neighborhood or enhance the community. 6, the proposed zone change would permit a level of development that would increase undue traffic congestion. Those were the 6 reasons that this commission adopted to deny the plan. Now you have an applicant who comes before you this evening and basically says, circumstances have changed. We're not going to have a free cut. Well, the free cut was not one of the reasons that you denied it. The free cut, if anything, works for the benefit of this applicant because they're going to keep the free cut in their pocket and use it at a later date. It doesn't help you a bit. It doesn't help the town a bit. The second changed condition is we agreed to a condition to limit use to single-family use. That's the reason. You are getting nothing here. The zoning regulations for a AAA zone limit development to single-family homes on 2-acre lots. What are you getting here? Nothing. Nothing. Both applications pertain to the same 2.284 acres. Both seek special permit approval for the same proposed use and structures. The remaining 14 acres and change are subject to the same standards in a AAA zone, just as it is now, just as it was before. Now, the irony of this, and I've got to say this, I don't know if this is televised live or on tape, but I hope that the folks down in Southport that I represented some months ago aren't watching this, as this commission told them, we don't want any more split zone lots. So we're going to approve a special permit and a zone change for Walgreens because we want lots to be uniform. And what's happening here is you are increasing the split on this lot. And to use Attorney Smith's analogy, the size of the area that would be created is twice the size of the football field at Giant Stadium. So if you're standing there and looking at the vastness of the field, the zone change area will be 2 of those. And it's just not justified. There is no reason to be here tonight. Now, I am totally confused, having read the statement, the letter from council, and this application as to what we're getting. What is this town getting? I've heard a condition. I've heard a restrictive covenant. Well, I don't know where Attorney Lesser did his research, but when I read the town code and the town charter, acquisition of real estate or any interest in real estate is within the purview of the Board of Selectmen with the approval of the representative town meeting. It's an interest in real estate, a restrictive covenant. So I don't really understand what's being offered. The zoning commission of the town of Fairfield is going to get a restriction that's recorded on the land records in its favor as if it's an owner of some interest in this real estate. It's not. And the Connecticut general statutes and your regulations do not enable this commission to accept interests in real estate. You can't own it. And you can't act for the town and accept a deed restriction for the town. You can't go and buy property for the town, and you can't buy an interest in property for the town. And I'll get into the case law on that momentarily. You are getting nothing. And if you had a restrictive covenant in your favor, and if someone came in with a use of higher density, without getting into detail, I don't think that this commission could go to court and restrict it, nor could this town, in certain instances where there's a dedicated need for a certain use of property, you'd be hard-pressed to go to court and get an injunction saying, we're going to exercise this restrictive covenant and not allow some form of development. Now, ironically, there's an appeal pending, and I'm representing some abutting neighbors or neighbors across the street appealing action by the Conservation Commission. And what happened here was in 2010, there was an approval by the Conservation Commission of the development of this property, of the issuance of a wetland permit. What we are appealing is all those nice changes that this applicant came in with late last year, in November, and that you looked at this spring, all of those changes that they said make this development more favorable. They presented some of them to the Conservation Commission and said, is this a major change or a modification of our wetland permit? And there was no public hearing, and there was no public comment, and no public input. And the applicant and their attorneys appeared at meetings of the commission that were not public hearings and provided testimony. And we took an appeal. My firm took an appeal on behalf of these abutting neighbors, saying that they did not follow the process. They did not follow the process on modifying their permit. And the regulations have some very precise procedures for modifying wetlands permits. Now, last Friday, or a week ago Friday, the applicant filed a motion to dismiss our appeal, claiming what we're really seeking is a second bite at the apple on the 2010 permit, because they've misread our appeal. Our appeal is that in saying that we don't need to modify the permit or go through the process, we feel that the commission acted improperly this past spring. So we're not looking at the 2010 permit, we're looking at what the commission did this year. That's the appeal we have. But they're saying you're looking for a second bite at the apple. So it's ironic that this applicant is here tonight, presenting the same plan, the same everything, biting at the apple, telling you it's the same apple, and asking you to approve this plan when nothing has changed. And they haven't offered anything different into the record from which you would create different findings. They've offered nothing about compliance with the master plan or further conformity with the master plan or any of the standards that you need to amend your regulations. And they're saying, well, let's decide it again. Now let me go one step further. The applicant has taken an appeal from the ruling of this commission back in April. And one of the things that they're alleging in the appeal is that some members of this commission looked at the other portion of the site. And they're claiming in their appeal that some members of this commission, in denying this zone change, considered what you were going to do with the other portion of the site. And you can't do that, because back then we had parcel A and parcel B were separate parcels. Don't consider parcel B. They're saying you could not look at what might happen on parcel B because their special permit and their zone change only pertain to parcel A. So be very careful tonight as you consider this to not comment on this being an improvement of that or a change of that, because that's what they may want you to say, because it will help them in their pending appeal. So I would urge you to consult the town attorney on that, because it could be very problematical to this commission. So, a couple of comments. First of all, we've incorporated the record, and I would like my comments from the last application incorporated as well. I understand the entire record is incorporated, so that would include our comments, and I'll try not to be too redundant.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't know what you're speaking of in terms of incorporating the prior record. I do not believe that it has been, and I don't believe the applicant made that request at in his presentation.
As I understood it at the beginning of his presentation, Attorney Smith asked to incorporate the record of the previous application, said he was going to be very brief tonight because all of the materials are in the...
No, that's not my understanding. Just to be clear, that's not my understanding.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's not my understanding, just to be clear.
All right, well...
Now, if you're asking for your comments to be incorporated into the record, you're free to make the request, to make the statement. I don't know whether that would be appropriate, but you're free to make that request.
I would make the request that the commission consider my comments in the record from the application that was denied in April.
Fair enough. I just wanted to be clear that I didn't hear and we haven't incorporated the applicant's prior record into this application, and your request is what it is, and if the commissioners want to go back to the prior record and consider your comments, they can do so, but I'm not making a decision on that as a legal matter, just to be clear.
Fair enough. A few comments on the presentation this evening. First and foremost, I've had the opportunity, I understand that the numbers offered by the engineer on traffic go back to 2011 and 2012. But for anyone to suggest that this intersection is working well right now, I would urge you at rush hour in the morning or rush hour in the afternoon at, say, 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock to drive through the intersection, to drive on Blackrock Turnpike at this exchange, because I had the pleasure last Friday of being backed up almost to the Blackrock Congregational Church trying to get on the Parkway southbound at about 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. I've similarly had litigation pending in the Superior Court in Danbury, and sometimes I'll take the route up through the reservoirs and up into Reading and through that way. And I can assure you that it is a challenge getting through that intersection on Blackrock Turnpike, on Congress Street, and so forth during rush hour. And I would not characterize that as a well-working intersection under any circumstances, and it backs up in almost every direction. And I urge the Commission to consider that. I don't know what your experiences have been. In terms of this sight line, I would similarly urge the Commission to drive down the Parkway, and you can view the blight that is the plant factory. And I would urge the Commission to truly consider whether you get sort of this snapshot view between some trees as you're coming down that hill southbound on the Merritt Parkway. And I would suggest that you get a far more expansive view of the property than this drawing, than this picture, particular rendition would suggest. I would also submit that the Merritt Parkway has undergone a massive tree cutting campaign this year in response to all of the trees during recent storms that we've had, the various tropical storms, hurricanes, and winter icing storms that have caused trees to fall in the parkway. And the Merritt Parkway Conservancy has been very involved with this issue, where essentially the state has clear-cut a swath along both sides of the parkway for nearly its entire length, and you could see that work frequently this past summer. So it is very wide open now compared to what it was. I don't know, this has just not been my experience as to what this site looks like, but I leave the Commission to its own conclusions. So I'm not entirely clear on what the applicant contemplates in terms of a deed restriction, but I would submit that under the charter and under the town code, this commission has no authority to accept an interest in real estate. I'm not sure who the grantee would be. There's been no proposed deed offered into the record. There is no indication of what that might be, who it might be in favor of, and it's totally, I would suggest, improper. Even if there were a deed restriction in favor of everyone, case law is clear in Connecticut that this commission, in exercising its jurisdiction, cannot under any circumstances consider a deed restriction in exercising its jurisdiction. I would cite the court to Petrel versus Zoning Commission of Old Lyme. It's a Superior Court decision.
How do you spell the first name?
Patrell versus Zoning Commission of Old Lyme. It was decided on June 28, 2011. It appears to be...
Do you have a site?
I don't have that site. I can get that for the commission momentarily on my phone, and I will do that, but...
And
the
you just said that we can't consider a deed restriction in the exercise of our jurisdiction.
I will cite you some case law on that. In Moskowitz versus Planning and Zoning Commission, the appellate court noted, that is 16 Con App 303. The appellate court noted, a planning commission cannot base its denial of subdivision approval on the existence of a deed restriction if the application otherwise meets the regulations. The responsibility of enforcing restrictive covenants in deeds is allocated to neighboring landowners, not to a municipal commission. Subsequently, a decision of the Superior Court stated, when a land use agency reviews applications to it, it cannot properly consider private property interests and deed restrictions, citing Lunn versus Darien Zoning Board of Appeals. That's 1994 Con Super Lexus 474. That's 1994 Connecticut Superior Court, Lexus 474. That's a February 25th, 1994 decision by Judge Fuller. Thus, the law is well settled that restrictive covenants in a deed as to the use of property are distinct and separate from provisions of zoning law and have no influence or part in the administration of zoning law. That's citing Aniello, A-N-N-I-E-L-L-O versus Vernon Planning and Zoning Commission.
Can I just interrupt you there for a moment?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll certainly look at these cases and the proposition that you're reciting, but it just strikes me that deed restrictions are a part, in some ways, of our very regulations. We just passed some revisions to our regulations relating to affordable housing, for example, where a deed restriction is a requirement of certain development over which we have jurisdiction.
And that may be authorized under 8-30G.
No. Forgive me, I don't want to debate the issue with you now. I'm just trying to understand that there are other deed restrictions which we do consider and we're required to consider in evaluating applications.
I can only tell you there's another case which is widely cited called Shiflin, where it says, in sum, restrictive covenants and zoning regulations are two entirely separate and unrelated limitations on the use of property. Zoning ordinances regulate the use of land through the exercise of the police power in accordance with a comprehensive plan for the entire community, and are entirely divorced in concept, creation, enforcement, and administration from restrictions arising out of agreements between private parties.
Yeah, I don't disagree with, nothing you're saying strikes me as odd.
Well, what do you contemplate in terms of a deed restriction then?
Well, I also don't dispute your statement that no sample deed restriction has been submitted to us to look at. So I'm not challenging you there. But I'm just trying to understand your argument with respect to the consideration of a deed restriction having some impact on our jurisdiction to consider this application.
All right.
I'm not getting it.
All right, so what's the consideration for the deed restriction, I would ask then? What is the consideration? There's no consideration. Yeah. You made findings and you made good judgments back in April. So I don't understand what is happening here. What you are saying is, if you give us
I'm not going to debate with you the difference and the distinction between, a new application that we have to consider, and I'm not telling you whether any one of us is leaning one way or the other, or we're considering it based upon what the 2014 application looked like or not. I'm trying to understand the nature of your argument that the offering of a condition of approval in the form of a deed restriction somehow is not appropriate for us in terms of jurisdiction to consider this application. I don't understand.
First of all, I don't understand what is being offered in the restriction, nor is it stated in the application. In the vaguest terms, there's two different things stated in two parts of the application.
But my question to you is to explain your argument with respect to a deed restriction in the hypothetical and how that relates to our jurisdiction to consider the application. I don't understand that.
Who does the deed restriction run to? It's
What?
an interest in property.
Well, a deed restriction, for example, in an affordable housing circumstance is a 40-year deed restriction that is not in favor of anyone in particular. It's a restriction on the owner of the land, preventing them from doing certain things for a certain period of time.
That is provided by statute.
No, it's not. In our regulations, we have deed restrictions that are required for an applicant to avail itself of other benefits under our zoning regulations.
You are authorized to adopt those regulations on affordable housing by statute, by specific law.
Okay. The deed restriction, though, does not run in favor of anyone in particular. It's not granted to any one in particular. It's simply a deed restriction.
Well then, if you have a deed restriction, who would enforce the deed restriction?
Well, that was a question which one of the commissioners asked of staff, which I believe is more appropriate for our consideration of the application on the merits. And it's a good question to which I think we deserve an answer.
I would also...
But it's not my question to you right now, and I'm just trying to understand the nature of the jurisdictional issue. I don't get how jurisdiction comes into play.
What I'm suggesting, well, that's the case law that states that.
Okay. All right, let's move on.
Quickly, the Shiflin site, please.
The Shiflin site is, in that case, it says,
No, just the citation.
Just the citation, please.
it's SCHIEFFELIN, Shiflin versus Westport Planning and Zoning Commission. It is 1993, Connecticut Superior Court. It's Lexus 2626. It's a Judge McKeever decision that is widely cited. And it says, once, the part that I did not recite for the commission is, restrictive covenants have no influence or part in the administration of a zoning law, and thus a zoning board may not deny a special permit on the ground that the use will violate a restrictive covenant. If a property owner is otherwise entitled to a special permit, it should be granted, notwithstanding private covenants which would prohibit the proposed use.
Yeah, and I understand that. In concept, I understand that. The issue before the commission was whether a special permit should have been granted. Whether the applicant could actually exercise their rights under the special permit was another question. And if a third party had an issue with them violating some legal restrictive covenant in their deed, that was a matter for those parties to take up.
Correct.
And I understand how that could relate.
Correct.
What I don't understand is how that relates to the facts in the application in this case.
And the site for Petrel is 2011 Connecticut Superior Lexus 1635.
Thank you. Yep. So that's all I'm trying to get at, is I don't understand how how that case, and we'll read the cases and we should move on. I'm just not getting how that factual and legal argument relates to this application. That's all.
Because I would submit that the commission does not have the authority to accept a restrictive covenant of this kind in this instance.
Okay, that's not what that's not what the blurb you just read to us means.
I understand, but each of these cases stands for the proposition that restrictive covenants do not apply to the exercise of the jurisdiction of this commission in evaluating special permits, subdivisions, zone changes, and the like.
Very good. Thank you.
So if that's the case, then if someone comes forward with an application pertaining to parcel B or whatever the back portion of this property is, then this commission, based on these cases, could not say, we deny this because there's a restrictive covenant that you provided in 2015.
Yeah, I understand how that might relate to a later application, which one could argue we should deny based on the restrictive covenant. It would, in my conception anyway, go more to if in fact there was an act taken in violation of that restrictive covenant, because it was a condition of approval, arguably, hypothetically, of this application, that if that act was taken in violation of that restrictive covenant, then we would have the authority to revoke the approval of the special permit. That was granted on the basis of giving the restrictive covenant.
So as I understand it, the process would be here, if this application were to be granted, then there would be a zone change in place. And someone is contemplating some sort of a restrictive covenant pertaining, I suppose, to part of this property. I don't understand what it is. The application seems to say this is going to remain a single lot. Well, I guess it's going to remain a single lot till this applicant exercises their cut, and then it's not going to be a single lot anymore. There's going to be a zone change. There's going to be a proposed medical building built. And then at some point down the track, something's going to happen with the back portion of the property, and by then there'll be a medical building built there. And what is this commission going to say? We're revoking your zone change? Well, there's a building sitting there with tenants operating on this site, hypothetically, and I think this commission is nowhere with respect to enforcing the restrictive covenant, and I'll go one step further. If the restrictive covenant restricted certain uses of the property, and if an applicant were to come in with a higher density use based on a need in the town that has not been met, then I would suggest that that trumps any zoning regulations and trumps any restrictions. And by the way, many of these cases, there are cases that restricted the use of property based on race in the past, and there have been cases in Connecticut that find that restrictions are void as against public policy.
Fair enough, fair enough. The one thing that I would say, and again, I don't have no proposed deed restriction has been submitted to us to consider for the kinds of things that you're talking about. But the one thing I would say is that my understanding is that it would relate to the special permit, not necessarily to the zone change. But I can't say that for certain.
Well, then on the zone change, what's new? Why are we here then? Going back to square one, what's new? Why are we here? The same application, with the same layout, with the same entrance, with the same sight lines, with the same building, with the same everything, except for free cut, which the developer's kept for himself, is the same. And you made these findings and you voted.
You've made that argument, and I've heard you.
A few comments. Once again, I'm incorporating, with the Commission's permission, my comments previously, but I had raised a number of issues relating to the previous development. I would suggest to the Commission, if you look at the plan, even though this is no longer a property line, there is a massive retaining wall that has not been landscaped in accordance with the regulations along, I guess, what would be the southerly boundary of the property at the zone line, and there are requirements that the boundary line there have a sufficient landscape buffer. I would suggest that in some places the retaining wall is 30 feet or more high, and I would urge you to ask the engineers as to what that looks like where it's cut into the hill here. I pointed out back in the spring in March, after we had a considerable amount of snow last year, I had pointed out that I question how this end of the parking lot's going to work when there's a massive amount of snow on this site. I had suggested to the Commission that perhaps the Commission would consider adopting regulations that provide in certain commercial developments for a space where snow being plowed out of a parking lot is going to be put, because really, on this site, you're going to lose a lot of parking spaces unless this developer is planning on trucking all the snow off the site. But I leave that to the good judgment of the Commission, but I would suggest that this is terrible site circulation on the southeast corner of the site, and I would urge the commission to take, and I was struck by the fact that a number of questions were asked about how that circulates in terms of the dumpster enclosure, in terms of cars being parked at that end of the site, in terms of how cars coming in that don't find a parking space are to get out of there. And once again, I suppose fire apparatus at that end of the site would have to back out the entire way, because there doesn't seem to have been demonstrated how a larger piece of fire apparatus would turn around on that site either, and would be forced to, I suppose, back out in the event.
With snow or without snow?
Yeah, under any circumstances.
Without snow, the hammerhead at the end there was about 90 to 95 feet wide. So that's a fairly large turnaround in the back there.
Yeah, well, it appears to a truck could only pull into it. I'm not sure that the backing out would be as readily achieved, because the distance here in this area, particularly if cars were parked there in the middle of the day, might not be as easy to access to turn around for a larger vehicle. Commission will give me one moment here. Can I borrow your scale? No. For your special permit approval, it doesn't meet your special permit standards in that the zone line appears to be this dotted line. Your regulations provide at section 12.7.6.4 that the adjacent residence district boundary, the setback, shall be 10 feet or the same as that of the adjacent residence district requirement. That's so that when you have a commercial district butting up against, in some commercial districts, there's a 0 setback. Obviously, in our residential neighborhoods, we know if the setbacks are 20 feet and 20 feet, that houses will be 40 feet apart. I think that was designed to avoid a situation where a commercial building is built right on the property line, you only have 20 feet. So this says, shall be 10 feet or the same as that of the adjacent residence district setback requirement. The rear setback requirement for the AAA zone is 50 feet, and I scale that. But the building is
I think you raised this in the last hearings as well, right?
Yeah, I did. It's about 35 feet, so it's a little short there.
Right. I think that if I remember, there was some debate as to whether that was a side or a rear line. Do you recall that?
Yeah, but I think that on the last application in their grid, they designated it as a rear property line, so that's why I interpreted it as such. Now, what they've done is they've said that the rear property line is 820 feet away, so I presume that they are still referring to that area, but I would seek that clarification, because I don't think there's 820 feet from on that side of the property.
Right. Very good.
So that's the way they've characterized it. I accept the drawings as they're submitted.
Right.
In terms of the design, I think Attorney Smith emphasized how they've worked somehow cooperatively with the Merritt Parkway Conservancy. The comments that I received from their design group were, first of all, in terms of the look of the building, and they are concerned because it's their understanding that the building is largely visible from the Merritt Parkway, and they are all about protecting vistas and preserving vistas. The comment was the stone wainscot, and maybe we can refer to the elevation of the building. The stone wainscot around the building is extremely awkward, as is the wide white frieze around the top. So I think they're referring to that in terms of the appearance. The porte cochere is unfortunate, and the pencil-thin posts with their massive boots is out of scale, so I guess they're referring to the thin posts on that. The color of the building does not blend into the setting. The cultured stone veneer is excessive and does not reflect the surrounding landscape. In other words, I don't think, it doesn't reflect the landscape. I'm not aware of any buildings in Fairfield that look like this, by the way. They also commented there should not be any signage visible from the Merritt Parkway, but signage is obviously not something that's picked up at this point.
Yeah, I think, I don't think that there's a sign plan application.
Correct.
As part of this, they would have, if this were to be approved.
Correct.
And the use was built, they would have to come back with a sign plan.
I would also submit that this drawing does not reflect the true dimensions of the proposed retaining wall or the design of the retaining walls on the site, and that might be of concern to the commission. I was struck by the fact that the applicant once again offered the letter, and actually Attorney Smith did reference the fact that the commission already had this letter previously from the broker.
Correct.
And you know, this author clearly has a financial interest in having larger medical buildings built, because that appears to be what he sells and the business that he's in. So I'm not sure that he's an independent source on the need for medical buildings. Then he provides a fair and balanced opinion on that, because he is a broker, and clearly he even admits in his letter that he deals with larger scale medical buildings. So all you're doing here is providing him with more inventory and more opportunity to place tenants. So I would urge the commission to consider that in adopting that opinion on the need for medical buildings. He needs more larger medical buildings. I'm not convinced that this community necessarily needs more larger medical buildings. In summary, I would urge the commission to achieve or to obtain an opinion on the enforceability. Well, I don't even know, once again, there is no restrictive covenant or proposed terms and conditions for a restrictive covenant in this application, and I viewed it on Friday. So there's sort of this elusive thing that's been referred to, and once again, in different parts of the submission to the commission, different things are described. And it says that the lot will remain a single lot, but it's just a single lot today. It's a single lot till the approval is made. There's also some limitation at one point on for so long as 2-acre lots are permitted. So I suppose the commission could rezone, or at some future point it could be rezoned, or I don't know how the commission could base a decision, putting aside the enforceability and the legality of it. You don't even know what it is. So I don't even know how you could rely on it as a ground for anything. But once again, the development of that portion of the site is not of any relevance to the zone change on the front portion of the site, for all the reasons that I highlighted back in March, and clearly based on the vote of this commission, it does not meet the plan of conservation and development of the town. There's been nothing that addresses that in the applicant's presentation on how the plan of conservation and development has changed since then. Finally, I'll sit down and you know where I stand, but I would urge the commission to limit the rebuttal to rebuttal. If I missed some portion of their application where these things were laid out, then the applicant might point out what he had said in his case in chief and how I may have mischaracterized it. But I would urge the commission not to accept new material on rebuttal that the public does not have an opportunity to address. So if there's rebuttal, but it should be just rebuttal as a matter of fundamental fairness. So once again, I would submit that for the reasons that I've outlined tonight, for the reasons that I outlined in March on an identical application, that I urge this commission to deny the application for a zone change and deny the application for a special permit. I don't know if the commission has any questions.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Attorney Green?
I would
Thank you.
just finally submit to the commission a document on standards for review of applications for a zone change. It's a document that I'll put into the record. And I think you'll find it looks remarkably similar to one that I'd submitted back in April, so it's not exactly new material.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other member of the public wish to be heard? Yes, sir. Just come on up and just state
My
your
name is
address.
Jesse Weiss. I live at 15 Alexandria Court in Greenfield Hunt. Just give you a little bit of background on myself. Hi, Joe. I was 12 years on the commission with Joe. I was vice chairman of the parking authority here. I was in market research for 40 years, taught statistics at 3 universities, and I'm a very logical kind of person. And thank God I'm not a lawyer. I'm in favor of this application for the simple reason that it will make this neighborhood look presentable for people who are coming up to Greenfield Hunt to buy property. I think it'll have nothing but a positive effect on the real estate values in Greenfield Hunt. I'd just like to take opposition to one portion. He says he represents the Merritt Parkway Conservancy. Let me make some comments on that. Recently, newspaper article, the state has a commission on the use of the Merritt Parkway, putting in a walking trail, right? And comments of the governor and the head of the Department of Transportation discussing this multi-purpose trail, altering basically the Merritt Parkway. And my understanding of the Merritt Parkway Conservancy is that their only cause for being is to preserve the Merritt Parkway as is, right? Is that logical? I'm a logical person. And the governor and the department and the head of the transportation department, I can't read without my glasses, James Redeker, had some advice for the opponents, including the Merritt Parkway. Don't expect to win. So in other words, this is a transportation hub, not a parking lot, according to the governor, and the governor is vehemently opposed to their opposing. Now, their primary reason for being is to preserve the parkway as it is. So here they are losing their primary reason. What they can have about this particular application boggles the mind. It does to me. How this piece of property all of a sudden is going to affect their basic premise of protecting how the Merritt Parkway looks today. That's all. It's not logical. And I'm a very logical person. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other member of the public? Sure.
Good evening. I'm Ed Lane. I live at 4321 Blackrock Turnpike. I live on Blackrock. And I would like to say that I've been listening to what went on tonight, and basically this idea of giving the 2 acres up there, there's a couple things. I've talked to developers over the years, and it's very expensive to get a road up there. And the question is where would that road go if they're coming so far down? And I'm right next to Ted, which is the house, he owns part of the plant factory. So we are right, and then if you look down, it slopes down where the building is, but you can see the parking lot from where our driveway is. So it's very commercial. When I bought this, I paid 888 zoning to the town, so we get hit with a pretty good tax bill, and we're residential. So I don't think it's very fair, the way they're trying to put this big monstrosity in there when you have a residential area.
So you're an abutting property owner to the main parcel that's
Yes.
in the application?
Yes.
Okay. What is your address again?
4321 Blackrock Turnpike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to be heard?
Good evening. My name is Bill Trutt. I live at 40 Palmer Bridge in Fairfield. And I'd just like to state for the record that I am in agreement with the application. I've heard a lot of conversation about vistas. The Merritt Parkway Conservatory is very concerned about what the sight lines will look like. I would ask them to please take a look at what's there now and perhaps think about improving it, which I believe the rector application would do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes.
Hi, my name is Tracy Reggioni. I live at 111 Lakewood Drive. I wasn't really planning to speak, but a couple of things have been presented this evening. I used to live at Greenfield Hunt, so I'm kind of part of the crowd. But I do now live on Lakewood Drive, which the egress is to Blackrock Turnpike. So my first concern is really with the traffic. I hear that the traffic study was done in 2011, and that's the worst case scenario being used. I've lived at this address for 15 years. The traffic in that corridor has changed dramatically, and it's changed dramatically since 2011. I cannot leave that road at certain hours without waiting at least 5 minutes for a break in traffic. So to me, to not have a traffic study that is current and make decisions on what's happening with traffic is a little odd. And the second part is really aesthetics for the town. For really the way the commercial flow is for Blackrock Turnpike, it seems to cut off at a certain point, and that's really more the Stormwater, and you start to progress up Blackrock Turnpike, and it starts to become much more residential and open space. And this will pull very dramatically a corporate feel up, I call it Upper Blackrock Turnpike. So those are the two concerns that I would talk to. I do have a concern also with the look of the plant factory site. I mean, I think that's very valid, but that doesn't mean this is the solution. There may be other solutions. I'm not sure people really want to build a house there, but it could be something that's not quite as grand on a corporate scale. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Sir.
My name is Jim Stathakos. I've lived in Fairfield for 50 years. I live at 1951 Congress Street. As Mr. Green mentioned, the traffic is horrendous. Some days I wait 10 minutes to get outside my driveway at the peak rush hours or before or after. I think the traffic is very bad now, and this is going to increase the traffic, and it makes a bad situation worse. They didn't do a good job on revamping the Merritt Parkway with the exits, and it's just a nightmare for the people who live there, so I'm against this.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anyone else wish to be heard? No? Going once, going twice? Rebuttal?
Yes, for the record, Chris Smith. With the traffic, this was something that came up in a call we had yesterday with Mike Galante and with Steve Chipola, that we had, and this is in the traffic report, there are numbers there for 2012 and 13, which are lower than 2011. So we use the higher numbers of 2011, feeling that they were more conservative to use. And Mr. Chipola just whispered in my ear that, and you can have him come up and state it if you'd like, but he's here, and he stated that for the state, the numbers that we use would be acceptable if a permit were required from the state. So they're more conservative than the 2012, 2013 numbers that were generated by the state to begin with. That's where those numbers came from. Before I forget, what I would like to do is thank you for entertaining this evening. As you know, there's the 12-month waiting period, and I did read in the minutes with the motion, and I appreciate, and on behalf of Mr. Richter, my client, we appreciate you essentially waiving that so that we could come in here. I mean, there's no prohibition, it's just within your discretion. You don't have to hear something similarly, you know, that's the same or similar to, if you choose not to. And again, our claim, as Mr. Attorney Green has mentioned, is the difference is the restrictive covenant, and I'll get back to that. For a housekeeping matter, if the commission would like to incorporate the entire record from before, I mean, if we're going to have, you know, if Attorney Green's comments come in, I suppose that at least our responses to his comments from the last one, you know, should come in. And I don't remember, I have all my notes, and I essentially went through them again, but maybe just to round it all off, especially since I was handed an 8-page memo, single-spaced, perhaps we should just incorporate, just for the record, so it's there in case it's needed, everything from before. But I know that's not specifically what I had asked for, but since Attorney Green has asked that his go in, I just think I would respectfully ask that that go in.
It's fine. I mean, I'll say the same thing that I said to him. You're, you know, at liberty to make a statement and make the request for the record. I'm not ruling on a request like that at this point. Mr. Barrett.
Yeah. I was just unclear, Mr. Chairman, on what both of them are asking us, because, you know, when you say he incorporated the previous application, we've got a bunch of documents, some are the same, some are different, and basically that entire record. So it was presented to us again. Is there some, when you say your rebuttal, or even when he says his comments, is there some expectation that we're going to go out and seek out on Fair TV and watch the 7 hours of hearings again to try to catch this again? I don't think, I mean, you know, usually when something's being presented, and, you know, Mr. Green did present a pretty lengthy document, which I haven't had a chance to read either.
Well, you read it last time.
I read it last time. It's the same one. So, yeah, I'm okay if it's the same document. I just wonder when you say you're responsible, like, what are we expected to do in that case? So I'm just not clear on that.
Yeah. And which is why I am saying the same thing that I said to Attorney Green, which is that you're free to make that request and that statement. I'm not making a ruling on that request or incorporating the prior record into this application. I don't know whether that would be appropriate. I certainly am not going to impose upon my fellow commissioners, some of whom might not have been on the commission, I'm not sure, but Commissioner Noonan, second night. So, I mean...
And you still came back.
Right. In any event, you know, I'm not going to impose on my fellow commissioners the obligation now to go pull 2 prior applications and public hearings and so forth to sort of make sense of all of that. I imagine that you want to do that so that if you cite to something that you said previously, that you're not called out by your adversary to say, well, that wasn't in this record, quote unquote. But, you know...
We made our presentation this evening, and I started off with a quasi-apology that we could either just incorporate everything and then say what were changed and go sit down, but didn't think that would be a good idea, and staff certainly recommended that we do our presentation. So we did our full presentation to you, and that's fine. I just wanted to... That's totally...
Big, fat packet of
all the
materials
same stuff from the last time, and you're more than, but you can address that during deliberations or however you see fit, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. But I was just stating that for the record. A question or a comment from the chair. This would be the restrictive, the condition that we're talking about would apply to the special permit. As a matter of law in Connecticut, no one can conditionally approve a zone change. I mean, you can't do it. Next point. All these cases, Moskowitz, I'm familiar with Lund, I represented the Lunds. Those cases, I haven't read them all, and I couldn't, you know, but 2 out of the 4 I'm familiar with. My understanding and guess is that those cases deal with the concept, and I think the chair cut to the core on that, where if there's an application before you and the applicant says they have an easement across somebody's property, and that person comes in and says, whoa, they don't have that easement across my property. I've got this right now in a town upstate, and the commission doesn't decide that issue. You're not a court. You just look at the application, as the chair said, in front of you, and as the quotes that were read, you make a decision based on that. If it turns out the party doesn't have an easement and tries to use it, well, guess what? That person who has that property and has the right to say you can't use it, you don't have that easement, they would go to court, and that would be a separate civil matter. And those cases basically hold arguments as to the applicability of a restrictive covenant, easements, conservation easements, those types of things. It's not for a planning and zoning commission. And that's apples and oranges, and I think the chair certainly understood that and read through that. As far as the enforceability of a restriction...
Before you move on,
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Barrett has a question.
He's actually probably going to answer it, and I just want to make sure you answer it. You know, understanding that the difference here is the restrictive covenant. Looking through the materials, if you could provide, you know, a little more clarity in your rebuttal about what this restrictive covenant wording and what it consists of, because I just don't see it, so you have that. So I just want to make sure you go to that, because
That's what I'm doing next.
I understand that that's the difference.
Just trying to
but
tee
I'm
that
just
up.
Not exactly, I'd like a little more clarity on it, so.
Well,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
and I would refer the commission to the cover letter. It's Exhibit 2 in the packet. At page 3, and right smack in the middle, it says that we would agree to a condition where the non-rezoned area is restricted to 2-acre building lot development in the future, so long as it's permitted by the zoning regulations. Obviously, if you ban it down the road, that prohibition shouldn't apply. In other words, if you take away the ability to have 2-acre zoning for that property, then it should be extinguished. I hand wrote that out right here, and it just says area blank, and I was asking Mr. Jobst, I want to make sure I get the right area that we show. That's the balance of the 17 acres, the 14.8, I believe it is, and change. Area blank is restricted to residential, 2-acre development is currently provided by the town of Fairfield's Residence AAA Zone District, so long as permitted by the zoning regulations. And it's Area B. And
That's what your letter says.
And that would be the restriction. That would be the condition of approval, that's the restriction that runs with it. There's nothing special, there's nothing unique that we're asking for other than...
Yeah, I actually don't think that you need to or should hand that up.
No.
That is what your letter says.
Yeah.
You have made those arguments for the record.
Perfect, okay.
You've identified the property in the record as parcel B in tab 7. For what purpose?
On that point involving what is proposed.
It's right in the application, it's right in the cover letter what's proposed, and the chair's indicating that it's there. You got up and said there wasn't anything, that everybody's operating in a vacuum, and I'm just suggesting respectfully, we're not.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, the letter refers to the zone change and the restrictive covenant. It refers to the concerns that the commission had on the zone change, and then offers that condition in response to the zone change, contrary to council's comments. But I would refer the commission to the statement of use, not the cover letter that council writes. There's a statement of use that's required under the regulations. So if council wants to submit a restrictive language, I think the commission should accept it, but it was not part, well, no, I don't think the commission should accept it.
So you know what? The record is before us. Frankly, these documents speak for themselves. The restriction that he just recited is what is in the letter. There is a statement of use. It says what it says, all right? He's free to make his arguments on rebuttal. I do not view this as new evidence, or none of the terms that he just recited are any different from what is in this letter. You've made your arguments. Let him make his rebuttal so that we can move on.
Okay. The restriction itself, I think the chair was right on with you deal with restrictions all the time in covenants. There's a conservation easement across the majority of this property. With any types of restrictive covenants that if you have impose a conservation easement, a no-build easement, somebody stands in front of you and says, we will honor that ridge line. I sat on a Wetlands Commission forever in my old town, and we had the ridge line there in North Branford, and everybody would show up and we'd say, do you have any problem with providing us with a conservation easement on the hillside? And invariably, if they wanted an approval, they knew what they had to do. We couldn't impose it, because that would be a taking, but everybody would just say, sure. Well, that's a restrictive covenant. That was a restriction on the property, ran with the property on the approval, and that happens all the time. And the best case, I think, is the restrictive covenant. I do those all the time for an 830G, and we put right in the affordability plan. I just filed one last week up in the northwest corner, and it says right there that the enforceability is what? Section 8-12. That's your enforcement people. 8-12 says the zoning commission is authorized by state law to enforce its zoning regulations and restrictions, and you delegate that authority generally to your zoning enforcement officer. So you certainly have that ability under Section 8-12. This is all a lot of smoke that's going on and being thrown around here. There's nothing unique about what we're talking about this evening. If there's some clarification as to what the condition applies to the zone change of the special permit, it's the special permit application, because you can't have it with a zone change. The cases that were cited have nothing to do with what we're talking about with that. They're totally different. And I would ask the commission to review them. I'd have to look at the one out of Old Lyme and the other one with Shefflin, but I'm very familiar with Lund and Moskowitz. The traffic that was referenced, that was last Friday, the holiday traffic. I don't know if you were trying to go upstate on 95 from Stamford at that time on Friday afternoon of a long holiday weekend, but I'm sure that's the worst time in the world. We have a traffic report. It's based on numbers generated by the state, and we utilized higher numbers that we didn't have to from 2011 instead of 2012 and 2013. The wetlands thing, it's not a modification. We went to the Wetlands Commission and said, the proposal is changing, the regulated activities are the same, right? Wetlands Commissions don't regulate a subdivision, they regulate the regulated activities associated with the subdivision. We went and said, the regulated activities associated with this development, with this medical office, are the same as the regulated activities with the one that you've already approved. In other words, they're already approved. They said yes. Attorney Green took an appeal, and he's going to try to get that second bite at the apple and claim that there's something that was amiss when that happened. But there's nothing unusual. Generally, staff signs off on that when you go and say, look, it's the same thing that was approved, they sign off. In this case, your staff said, I want you to go to the full commission and have them confirm whether it's the same or not. And they did that. So that's what's under appeal. It has really nothing to do with what we're doing here tonight. So in conclusion...
Before you conclude, can you speak to the setback issue, please?
And I know that was raised the last time around, and Walt can, I think, address that, and I do think it had to do with side yards and whatnot. Thank you.
I don't have the exact numbers, but I did calculate them to make sure that we were in excess of 30 feet. From this point to the zone line is greater than 30 feet. I think it was like 30.
So
and this is a side yard. This is the front. This is a limited access highway. There's not really a road per se. This is the side yard. You have a side yard setback. AAA side yard setback is 30 feet. We are in excess of 30 feet.
So that angled line is the side, you're claiming side.
Side yard.
Okay, where is the back of the lot? Where's the back?
Of this?
Yeah. Yeah.
The zone line back.
Is there a back
Is
line?
there a back? It would be here. The building ends here. Take it to any of that, you're greater than 50 feet.
Say that again.
30 feet here, right? 30 feet here where the side yard. Here's the end of the building. You took that to any line of the zone that's greater than 50 feet.
Okay.
I mean, this is not the rear line to the building,
because the building is not below it.
Well, I mean, just because I turn a house doesn't mean that I've changed the lines. Right.
That's what he says from here. So it's very close here to here. It's just it's opposite. This wall. This is the side. So this thing's from here to here. That's all my first third, because this is the side.
We can explain that in executive session.
I asked the same question last time and Mr. Nguyen answered, so maybe he could answer it in an executive session.
Yeah,
I guess we just
that's
want
fine.
that.
And you know what, I appreciate that, and I apologize for the interruption here with, but he was explaining it to me. I couldn't really see it as you were pointing it out there, but anyway, thank you for speaking to that.
On behalf of Mr. Richter and our team, thank you very much, and again, thank you for agreeing to hear us again, and I respectfully request that you approve the two applications with the condition before you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll close the public hearing, and I'll adjourn the meeting.
What you doing? You know where my